today we're talking Pan-Africanism. I have been thinking about this idea of we are not all the same. I started reading a few things online just to reacquaint me with the idea, check that I had my understanding correct. And it turns out that we're pretty much all on the same page. Pan-Africanism has two sides to it: political and social. The political Pan-Africanism that was pushed during the decolonial movements of Africa. What this political Pan-Africanism looks like is advocating for a single body to represent Africa as a whole. I guess create a United States of Africa. So this would mean that African states, as we know them, would dissolve into a single unit. Social Pan-Africanism goes hand in hand with this idea because the rationale for uniting is that we share a common history, we share a common struggle, we share common interests, common goals, and we need to unite in order to achieve those things. Social Pan-Africanism is something I think most of us can get with because it's even displayed in that simple act if you're from any different part of the world and you're living outside of that country. Walking down the street, you might see someone else who you recognize being from your country. Maybe you overhear them speaking the same language. And sometimes you smile at each other because there's just that common recognition that you share this geographical heritage, right? But beyond that, you might not necessarily be thinking as far as, okay, we are now going to be sharing the same country because we all come from this one unified place. What I think it is helpful to do is just explore some ideas that challenge Pan-Africanism, political Pan-Africanism, to generate discussion. For you, of course, to let us know what you think in the comment section. And let's critically look at Pan-Africanism together. I was reading some articles. There was one that I came across that had this call to action at the end saying, "To your tents, O Africa." And this person was against Pan-Africanism, even saying such phrases as flimsy ideal of the brotherhood of the African people, and basically saying that this is no good reason for a country to lose its flexibility that comes with independence. Also noting that race and geographical location cannot be the determining factor in determining economic and political ties. Rather, this particular author was arguing that countries must determine which alliances produce the most benefit. You, like me, might have a background in international relations. You might have an interest in how geopolitics translate into how countries make decisions, how leaders make decisions, policymakers. I really see the merit of this argument because one of the international relations theories that we learned about in terms of seeing the world and how it operates is that realism is very real. Okay, let's actually look at the definition because, realism in international relations is a dominant state-centric framework viewing global politics as a competitive, anarchic struggle for power, security, and survival. It prioritizes national interest over morality. This theory, looking at the world through a realist lens, would necessitate the delegitimizing of Pan-Africanism because Pan-Africanism cannot exist where Africa today is made up of unique countries, and each of those countries are going to be making decisions that will suit them best. The realistic interests come before the moral good. And the moral good in this sense is, yes, we should unite because we are the same people. I think there's even a falseness in that claim. We're not the same people. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually not a bad thing. There was another author that I came across. They had quite a lengthy article, but basically they ended up proposing something alternative to Pan-Africanism. And that is called Pro-Africanism. Pro-Africanism, rather than Pan-Africanism, accepts the differences that exist between different African countries, different African peoples. Pro-Africanism is this idea that you can just be you can just be your country, and in being your country and doing the best that you can for yourself, for your country, that is going to flow on to doing the best for Africa, because we are on the same continent at the end of the day, but in our unique countries, we do have unique struggles. We do actually have unique histories. For example, the Akan people of Ghana are different to the Zulu people in South Africa, different to the Igbo people in Nigeria. It goes on and on. Rather than uniting into a single country, we can promote Africa's interests by promoting our own interests and the interests of our countries. It makes sense to me. Pan-Africanism was very significant in the decolonial movement. It definitely has its place. We will not take away the great inspiration, vivaciousness, urgency that Pan-Africanism provided to leaders that really wanted to bring independence and self-determination to African states. Then again, it's like Pan-Africanism is kind of removing that, because even to get that independence, which we know that's a whole different debate, are we truly living in post-colonial Africa? If we are looking at uniting politically, putting aside the interests of our own unique nations and conflating everyone's interests together, it kind of defeats the purpose of what Pan-Africanism truly achieved back in those decolonial movements, because the reality is we have the African Union, which previously was the Organization of African Unity. That is kind of seen as the modern manifestation of Pan-Africanism. But even look at that institution and all the difficulties it faces in making things happen across the continent. Look at even the unique African countries today. There is challenges even today on reaching agreements. So why then should we now strive to this agenda? It's interesting because this is actually an agenda that is still being pursued by the African Union. There's actually a document that I read. It's produced by the African Union, and it's basically projecting what Africa will look like, I believe, in 50 years. I think this is part of the 2063 agenda. So however many years, it's projecting what Africa will look like. And as part of that, they are envisioning greater infrastructure, greater mobility, greater railways and logistical connection between the countries, but also then this idea of having a common currency, having common languages. I would tend to lead toward this slant of we can embrace social Pan-Africanism, but political Pan-Africanism might not actually be as helpful as what we think. It was the first article I was looking at. The author pointed out that even within Pan-Africanism, there is going to be inequalities generated. That's because already we see on the African continent, there are some economies that are more dominant than others. So Nigeria, when we look at that economy, when we look at South Africa's economy, these are some of the heavyweights within the African continent. So Pan-Africanism, if we're looking at uniting, obviously those dominant economies are going to overpower the interests perhaps of the other states. It also spoke about in that article, which I thought was a good point, African states should be able to deal with other countries based on their self-interest, and we can't just narrowly constrain ourselves to only looking inward. There are more countries. And it was interesting at the World Economic Forum, it was Canada's address, it was interesting the kind of state of the world that that address described. It was kind of like middle power countries are waking up and they are realizing that they now need to deal with countries based on their own self-interest. So this is the direction that the world is going in. Pan-Africanism demands a lot more of African countries. If we look at the contemporary challenges facing African countries, Pan-Africanism and trying to unite under a single political structure is just going to create distractions from these issues that need to be addressed. Pan-Africanism is not necessarily going to address them if individual countries and states cannot even agree. There was one article that I read that was really especially pro-Pan-Africanism. One of the things that I highlighted was the tasks before us are clear. Reclaim the political identity of Pan-Africanism, nurture a new generation of competent leaders, rebuild the African state as a people-centered institution, and develop a continental strategy to navigate the emerging multipolar global order. Why do these things have to be achieved through Pan-Africanism? I do like the idea of pro-Africanism. That is a theme that many of us are already embracing. When I read this paragraph, the tasks before us are clear, and then there were all those tasks listed. That is no small feat. That is a major undertaking, and it is something that I've even heard in conversations that I can even agree with. We're not going to see this in maybe my generation. We can be hopeful. Of course, we are seeing already the benefits of when things go right, because things don't always just go wrong. There are many examples of things going right. African countries really need to focus on the infrastructure issues, the economic issues, the issues of social disadvantage and marginalization, unemployment, health issues, and all of those things, deaths on the roads. Like, we need to look at all of those things. And Pan-Africanism is great as a social ideal. Yes, we should see ourselves in brotherly, sisterly love, but let's not now add more homework to the list of piling up issues. The African Union is there. Look at reforming the African Union, making it work more efficiently, looking at how it can actually coordinate more of these infrastructure projects across the continent. Look at strategic points where African countries can come together, rather than, I think we can say it's a bit naive to think that African countries are going to unite all together. We are not all the same. There are diverse strengths, skill set. We can also see the exciting future of having exciting partners from other parts of the world as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you identify as a Pan-Africanist? What are your thoughts on this ideology, the political one, the social one? I definitely can see the merit in it. As we've explored, I think there are very practical challenges. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's keep the discussion going in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Madasipa, Yaveshia. I'll see you next video. All right, take care. Bye.